Well, welcome to the program. It's great to have you back, Teresa. I can't believe it's been 2 years since we last chatted.
Oh, hi, Simon. Look, thanks for having me back. It certainly doesn't seem like it's been 2 years, but then it has been, particularly the last 18 months, a very unusual couple of years I think we all find ourselves in. But yeah, no, good to be back and good to be talking to you again.
Now, as I understand, I don't think your role has changed dramatically in that you're still the head of funding at Virgin Australia. How has the role evolved and what's your remit these days, just to let the listeners know?
No, that's right, Simon. So I remain in the same role at Virgin, still looking after funding and leasing. How has the role evolved? Look, as everyone knows, Virgin went into administration primarily as a result of COVID. What it meant for the role and for the team was really just looking at restructuring a lot of the existing facilities that we had. Unfortunately, our balance sheet wasn't as strong as we would have liked going into administration, but the administration has given us a wonderful opportunity to restructure all our arrangements. We've been able to deleverage the business, so we're in a much better place now than we were, pre-COVID.
I mean, Treasury is one of those funny things, Teresa, where I always think the exciting stuff and the interesting stuff in Treasury is when something blows up or, there's an issue. Obviously, going into that administration was that scenario. But I would imagine over the last 18 months, 2 years, you've really had some interesting, meaty projects to get your teeth into from a Treasury perspective. Talk us through.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I think you're right. Treasury really does hit the forefront in a crisis. And I think, I don't think it would have just been Virgin, but treasuries across the country, as COVID hit, just the uncertainty around it would have really just been trying to shore up balance sheets, restructure, put in place credit lines. And look, we pretty much did sort of the same thing in reverse, if I can put it that way. Like I said, ours was really just restructuring positions to get, improvements. A lot of investors were also under stress, particularly in the leasing market. So, the COVID impacts on their businesses were equally dramatic. So we were able to work in partnership to really, get outcomes that worked for them, protected their businesses, and equally gave us, significant cost restructure and ongoing flexibility whilst the environment remains uncertain.
Any sort of major highlights or things that you've really enjoyed working through over that time, Teresa?
Look, I think that the highlights for me were twofold. I mean, look, number one, administration. I know that sounds a little bit unusual, but from a team and an individual point of view, it was a wonderful development opportunity. You never think of the business through the lens of an administration. And what we did find is the administration does give you a lot of opportunity to restructure things that perhaps outside of administration wasn't possible. And just to give you an example, we had been at Virgin trying to simplify our fleet, for a number of years. And, when you've got long-term contracts, it's very hard to exit out of those contracts without significant cost and impost to the business. And so the administration really afforded this sort of one-off opportunity to be able to pretty much rewrite all those. And like I said, because a lot of our investors were equally under pressure because of the impact on their businesses, we were able to achieve outcomes that simply wouldn't have been possible outside of administration. So I think that to me was one highlight, just the development, personal development in understanding how the administration worked. I mean, it's quite fascinating, a specialty in its own right. That's not to say that I want to go back there again or experience it again, but, there were certainly a lot of takeaways, and it makes you think of your deals and your go forward position in a slightly different way, knowing sort of what the implications are when it all, ends, through circumstances of no one's fault. I suppose that was one highlight. And look, really, the second highlight was really just, like I said, improving the balance sheet, being recapitalised under new owners, as everyone knows, we're now owned by Bain Capital, so there's just so many positives that came out of it that really those were the highlights for us sort of during what was otherwise, a scenario dominated solely by sort of COVID discussions.
I mean, just touching on the COVID, Treasury has traditionally been one of those roles or parts of the business that needs to be in office. I think going into COVID, most people would say, no, it's a 5-day-a-week role in the office. How have your team coped with the work from home, being remote, and how has Treasury sort of functioned during that time?
Look, yeah, we did go to remote working. Look, what we did was we really made a concerted effort to stay connected during that time. And look, if anything, the conversations that we've had as a team since then have been that the remote work from home brought us closer together, in fact. Ironic as it sounds. So we still do continue to work from home from times. You know, we've got one of our team members who has now relocated to Brisbane, so we've got a split team again. But just to give you, I suppose, a real, you know, a real life example of what is possible when you're working remotely. I mean, we worked through 7 months of the administration with the administrators, you know, their advisors. You know, we went through due diligence with a number of potential people who were interested in buying the business, and then ultimately all the due diligence with Bain Capital sort of to, you know, take over the business and exit administration. We did that over 7 months, and it was all done remotely. Not once did we meet one of those people personally. So, you know, one of our administrators has been known, has become very famous because he's a beautiful grand piano in his work from home office. But it just goes to show that it doesn't really matter where you are, right? I mean, if you have to work remotely and the circumstances dictate it and you've got the right team and the right mentality, it's amazing what you can achieve. So look, as I said, we still are working remotely from home. You know, we've got flexibility. We've got people with young families in our team as well. So, you know, they split their time between office and home when we can. And look, to me, it's all about the outcomes, right? Not necessarily about, you know, where you're working from.
I think that you've just hit the nail on the head for me, Teresa, it's just fascinating that it's become about outcomes rather than sitting at a desk. And when you actually take that view, which I think has been fast tracked over this 18-month period where people are totally focused on outcomes now, rather than saying, well, no, you just need to come and sit in this desk and be here for 8 hours or whatever it may be. Interestingly enough, I have a good friend who works in private equity, not with Bain, but a very similar organisation. And he said he would never have done a transaction like you guys have just done without having a lot of time with the management team. And he's doing transactions now that are, you know, global because he doesn't have to meet the teams anymore. It's quite fascinating how much the world's changed, isn't it?
Yeah, no, and that was the experience we had in administration. You're right. I mean, it was global calls. Everything was done on Teams. You know, it was not even BAU. You know, it was huge transactions, you know, huge consequences of getting it right or not getting it right. Yet, you know, it worked. So it's remarkable what can be done. You know, the human spirit and the desire to get those outcomes is really what makes it work.
And do you think that will change the way that you look at the team moving forward and what you guys need to do, you know, work from home? Is that something that has changed ongoing now?
Look, I think what we found is, you know, you can certainly work from home, you know, 100% of the time when circumstances dictate. I think where it's likely to land is, you know, some mix, some hybrid, you know, between some working from home. But, you know, it is actually nice to connect in person when you can. It's just sort of those, you know, those casual conversations that are just a bit more difficult to have, I think, when you're trying to work remotely. You know, you can't sort of just turn around to someone and go, hey, I've just had this idea. What do you think about? It's sort of, you know, much more difficult to do that when you've sort of got to arrange a Teams call or a Zoom call or, you know, pick up the phone. So I think it will end up being hybrid for our team at least.
And I totally agree. I think that the people that I think are going to come out of this finding it harder are the new starters or people that are new in an organisation. When you've got an existing team and you all know each other, it's just, you know, the relationship's there. You can do what you did before, but just do it remotely. Whereas bringing someone new into the organisation when they don't know the culture, they don't know the way things work or who to speak to, that's where the challenge is, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Simon. I see that with my own son, who's just recently started working, and it's been in a remote scenario. And I must admit, he is struggling with that because you're right, you don't have those relationships, so you're just trying to work out how you fit in a remote world.
And I think that the other, speaking of your son, like I see my nephew is the same, where he's just finished university, he's starting his first job, and those people learn the most being in the office, because it's not really about here's a task, go and do it. It's listening to other people, hearing how they talk to customers, hearing how they talk internally, understanding, that I guess just getting tidbits of their knowledge that you only get listening into conversations that you can't get remotely. Is that something you're seeing with your son?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, 100%. It's just those casual conversations and overhearing a lot of stuff and being immersed in those discussions, right? That you can't be when you're sitting at your PC, a world away.
And have you had to hire over the COVID period? Has that process been something you've had to go through, or you've been fortunate that the team's been stable?
No, unfortunately for us, it's probably been the opposite. So, we did exit administration with as a smaller airline. So unfortunately, we did need to let some people go. So it's been the opposite for us. I suppose the only observation, though, in coming out a smaller airline with a smaller treasury as well. Our treasury sort of used to be subdivided into sort of, areas that covered risk management, funding, etc. Now, a lot of those teams are now one person in those teams. So we don't have the depth that we did before. But I think a couple of takeaways from me are just that I've always believed that you basically hire for attitude, potential, drive, ability to work independently, not necessarily for technical skills. And I think what the standouts were those members of the team who could just apply that drive, that knowledge, that common sense, that analytical mind to apply what they knew to the circumstances we found ourselves in, that really were the ones that were the standouts. And they're the ones that we've kept as well, primarily because we can now sort of use them to toggle across the team as well. If we've got someone away and it's a team of one, then we need someone else to be able to step into those roles. So we're just finding that, someone who probably has a broader treasury knowledge and can, step in and out of different roles as needed is what's key for us as we're a smaller treasury going forward.
Obviously, technology has been a big player in the way that we've been able to adapt during this time. Process improvement is always there. The payments landscape is changing really quickly from a treasury perspective. What sort of key technologies are you guys considering at the moment from a treasury perspective at Virgin?
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, we're coming at it from, I suppose, a legacy issue that there hasn't been enough investment or as much as probably should have been. So we are sort of really, going back to basics here. So, we're upgrading doing a major upgrade of our ERP system, looking at implementing a new TMS. There's a couple of things that we're looking at sort of, in compliance areas of how we could use AI and, possibly just partnering with some, partners on, tapping into their portals and things just to get some process improvements and efficiencies through the team.
Teresa, networking has been challenging during the lockdown. I know we always used to have a regular catch up at GG Espresso. We haven't been able to do that. How have you kind of approached networking over this challenging time?
Yeah, look, it's been an interesting one, Simon. Look, I think being Sydney-based, what we found is, because Sydney wasn't as impacted by COVID sort of last year, we were still able to impact in network, but, smaller events, like you say, catching up with coffees. So just, using the opportunity when you could to just reconnect with people. Otherwise, our networking has largely been remote. So, reaching out to partners, connecting when we can. And, if anything, there's big IOU of a lot of networking that is going to happen once, things reopen.
Absolutely. And I mean, the one thing I've noticed is conferences were cancelled or were virtual. And conferences are great, I think, when you want technical information or, to get content out there. But the thing I've really struggled with is being a supplier or a vendor, you just don't actually get time to bump into someone in a room or to have as people are jumping between the different sessions. So how have you sort of approached that? Have you got value out of the virtual conferences, or has that just been more of the technical side of it?
Look, to be honest, just given what we went through with the administration, and really that we were just really making sure that we were focused on getting out of administration, to be honest, we didn't really attend even any virtual networking events because our focus really was very inward looking, if I can put it that way. As we move forward, we probably will look to attend some events, but a lot of the events, networking events that we would do are overseas as well. So that's limited us. So we have registered for a couple of things that are of interest. So it'll be interesting, to your point, to see just how much we take away from sort of a virtual networking event.
It's funny because I haven't seen anyone do a virtual networking event particularly well. Like if it's one-on-one, it's great. But once you start getting, 3, 4, 5 people, it's just it's very hard to make it work. So I'm intrigued to see if the technology catches up with that to make it better. But yeah, I definitely haven't seen it so far. Teresa, one last question for you. Anything do you think has changed in terms of being a successful treasurer? Has the current environment meant that you have to change the way that you operate to be successful, you think, in Treasury? Or has it sort of the same things are important, but it's just changed to be more virtual?
Look, I think it's still the same things that really drive, what's important in Treasury. It's really all that balance sheet management, your liquidity management, and managing and having the right people. And I think, COVID hasn't really changed that. I think if anything, it's really just made teams more focused on that, and perhaps given, what we do, a sense of urgency, or more of a sense of urgency, just given, the uncertainty of what this represents than would otherwise be the case. But yeah, look, for me, it's really just balance sheet management and really just people, and just also in this environment, just being mindful of, people's well-being. Working from home is fine, but, when people are at home for long periods of time, they're dealing with young children and homeschooling and those kinds of things. I think we just do need to sort of step back from, the outcomes and just really think about, making sure that our people are doing okay, and just being empathetic of the challenges that working from home can bring for some people in those circumstances.
Teresa, it's always a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to hopefully catching up with you sometime soon at GG Expresso.
Yep. Likewise, Simon. Thanks again.